This is Creighton Alexander, the campus coach, and today we're talking with Trent Sheppard, the author of God on Campus. Trent works with 24/7 Prayer, lives in Boston, and he's also going to Skype in with us on Refresh to talk to us about the book. God on Campus is going to be our common reading this year. Hope you pick up a copy and join the conversation. Trent, we're glad to have you.
Yeah, man, it's good to be here, Creighton.
Great. Trent, tell us a little bit about your history and how you got to this point of writing the book God on Campus.
Sure, man. Well, I live in Boston, and with a small group of friends, we share a big old house together. My wife and baby and a few couples here, and I got deeply involved. I think probably where I track back some of my heart for the campus scene was when I was a student myself, and just the questions you're asking during your collegiate years, the big questions of life. And I think during that time, I realized that this period of life is so significant and decisive for the rest of our life. That it got me really deeply interested in the student scene. I didn't realize back then that I'd still be going forward with students, a few years later. But here I am. I worked for 8 years with Youth with a Mission in the United Kingdom, and actually during a portion of that, I was a Methodist youth worker at a local church just north of London, and did a lot of work with college and university students during that time as well. And so it's out of all that, man, that the heart for this book emerged, and to wrestle with the question of what does it look like for God to be on campus now.
So how did you get around to writing the book? What was the impetus for that?
Yeah, I mean, I had gotten deep into the study and the reflection on awakenings, moves of God. I've been in that for a number of years from my parents, hearing stories about it, and a guy by the name of Dr. J. Edwin Orr, who mentored my parents for a while, and I think then I specifically began to see how God seemed to be especially at work on college campuses, and how there were critical moments in collegiate history that actually went on to influence all of society. Hmm. And so I got deep into that. So this was kind of building in me for a while, and then my dear buddy Pete Gregg with 24/7 Prayer had felt God was really leading him to call campuses in America to pray. And out of that, Pete came to me and asked me to write this book. We didn't know what it would be back then. He had read something by J. Edwin Orr called Campus of Flame, and thought maybe there's a way we could write something fresh for today. And so he came to me and asked me, and it was sort of like the final straw. That, okay, I need to give some serious attention to this, and that's how it emerged, man.
Well, in the book, you at the very beginning, you talk about a dream that also helped push you to write this. Can you tell us a little bit about that intersection?
Sure, absolutely. I tell about three experiences at the beginning of the book. One about how God had led Pete to call Campus America to pray, campuses in America to pray. And then a dear buddy of mine named Dave Blackwell, basically a dream that involved how that when these campuses would begin praying, it was like a call for the dead to get back into the game, is how my buddy Dave would describe it. And then out of that, I had a dream of my own, and to be honest with you, I don't have a lot of super spiritual dreams. I want to have more, but I don't always, and so I was really surprised when I had a dream on the back of my fiance at the time. It had on the back of her prayer for me, to have a dream about sort of the direction of our life, and out of that I had this dream that basically the critical element in it was a horse with two horns, a talking horse of all things, a bit like a scene out of the Chronicles of Narnia. And but in the dream, I knew a few things, and one was that this horse was a university student. Two, I knew that she was tremendously disillusioned with her faith and religion. And three, I knew that she was just terribly hungry for a faith, a movement that was intellectually honest, It was socially engaged. It was personally devoted. It was genuinely free. All of these things together. And I think that even with the horse having these two horns, not like a unicorn, but like a bicorn, the two horns, as I interpreted at least, represented personal and social holiness. So the idea of a radical devotion to God, but equally a radical engagement with the defining issues of our time. So people who were committed to prayer and intimacy with God, but equally they were committed to advocacy for the broken, the outcast, the poor, the needy. And I think so often in the history of Christianity and in the movement of Christianity right now, we divide those things. And sort of in a competition with one another to who can be the most spiritual, you know? Do you pray enough or do you serve the poor enough? And I just saw this ache from this character in my dream of these worlds merging, you know, back and forth, becoming one. And so out of that, I begin to try to study and understand what does that look like on campus history in the past. And that's sort of how the dream pushed me down the road on writing this book.
Well, so when you look at these student movements throughout history, what are some common elements that keep arising out of them?
Yeah, I mean, I think that one of the most exciting ones that and the most simple ones create is friendship. There is not a time in history that I can tell of this, that in these movements I'm talking about, that someone is basically just working on their own. There's always the influence of others in their life through friendship and relationship. And I think seeing that, it was just so powerful to me, because I think, you know, friendship can be seen as a side issue, a distraction, or even a tactic, as opposed to just core to our original design as humans. And there's something about getting real with one another in the place of friendship, that the pretense that breaks down, and genuine friendship that enables us then to get real with God. Not a lot of pretense there in the same way. And because of that, it's like it opens up the potential for God to move in a new way through a small group of friends. That's one of the common elements. Of course, prayer is another huge common element to these movements. Just over and over again, you track it back to like a small group of friends praying together, who don't have the answers or the strategy, but they've got this ache, and that's where they began. So yeah, a couple of them, friendship, prayer, simple things like that, oddly enough, that can make all the difference down the road.
Now, you do as a complete solid when you talk about John and Charles Wesley at Oxford. What drew you to the Wesley boys?
Oh man, the Wesley boys are heroes of mine for a long time. I was trying to think when I first got interested. In my undergrad studies, I had done some study on John Wesley specifically, in terms of individuals who shaped the Western world. And then in my grad studies, I did a paper, especially on Charles Wesley's hymns and how that affected 18th century England. And then in time, some more work on the relationship between John Wesley and his influence on William Wilberforce. And so I think I've just been a fan for a long time. I think even living in England and getting to visit some of the places where they lived and worked, it got me even more deeply interested. And of course, then the realization that Methodism as a movement, it was birthed out of a movement amongst students at Oxford University. I couldn't help but dig into that story, man, because more so than any denominational movement that I know of, Methodism was birthed out of the campus, and that was a powerful story for me.